All right. So, how are you? How has the semester been going for you? We are already in Module 4. Can you believe it? And that only means we've got 4 and 5 left before you to get to your final. So, to me, Module 4 is probably the most important module in the entire course. It, to me, is the most useful one, and it's the one that is going to last you throughout your lifetime. The other thing about Module 4 is it is about evaluating information, something I wish our entire society globally was able to do. But I'm not going to complain. We'll just start with your course, okay? All right. So why do we need a process in order to evaluate information? It's because, especially now with AI, deep fakes, misinformation, fake news, disinformation, YouTube, TikTok, and social media, anybody, whether or not they're an expert, can produce information that looks credible and trustworthy. However, a recent study actually showed that almost 87% of the health advice that's found on social media on certain topics like smoking is made of misinformation. Can you believe it? The ability to evaluate information is so important, especially now when we have so many people who get advice, identify trends, do things, and even vote based on what is out there in the news that may or may not be trustworthy. What's interesting is even academics have issues between telling what's true and what's false. As you'll see in your module, I talk about a study where they took a bunch of PhD historians, Stanford undergraduate students, and what they called professional fact checkers, which you're going to become at the end of this module, and gave them a choice of 2 different websites. One was completely bogus, or I should say not trustworthy whatsoever, and the other was based on trustworthy, credible experts. It turns out only 50% of the historians, the ones with PhDs, were able to tell which site was the trustworthy one. Now, fact checkers, on the other hand, all of them, all 100%, were able to tell which site was trustworthy in a matter of 5 minutes, and that was it. What made the difference? Oftentimes, even experts, even myself, have been guilty of this. We try and judge a website or an information source based on our gut reaction, based on what we believe, what we think is true. And if there's something that comes in that is contradictory to that, then we start to question its validity. But the problem is that you can't just rely on your gut, especially as an academic researcher. Your job is going to be about learning information about your field. So you need to know which information in your field is credible versus what is not. The trick with those fact checkers and the fact that they could tell the false website within 5 minutes was because they used a process called SIFT. S as in stop, I as in investigate, F as in find better sources, and T, trace back the claims. You're going to learn this in this module. One of the things I want to bring out is that misinformation, social media, news, anything that you see out there is spread through emotion. Studies found that when people were confronted with information that challenges their core beliefs, they have this emotional reaction. In fact, a physiological reaction. The body reacts as if it is being physically threatened. And this is sometimes the reason why you see this on the news all the time. When people are confronted with information that doesn't follow along what they believe, they get very defensive, very emotional about these things. I'm sure you've probably encountered friends or people in your social circles that get very emotional about certain topics. Well, it turns out there's actually a physiological tie to that. I like calling it the amygdala tingle. When you are faced with the belief, or when people are faced with a belief that contradicts their own core beliefs, their own ways they believe the world exists and how information comes to them and how, the laws of the universe are created. It causes a psychological reaction in our amygdalas. Our amygdalas are like kind of a little bit back there. They're an almond-shaped organ, and it just starts emitting. It starts to get stimulated. That's why we call it an amygdala tingle. And when that happens, it triggers the fight or flight response, right? Fight or flight. It's a fear response. The problem is when that amygdala tingles into fight or flight, we stop thinking logically. We start thinking physiologically about getting out of that danger. This is the reason why people get so defensive, so argumentative. Sometimes people will discredit this new information. They'll start calling it faulty, or in some cases, it causes them to almost defend their core beliefs, even if they're presented with contradictory information. And that's actually called the backfire effect. It's actually a thing. The media, social media, misinformation, everybody that's out there kind of knows about this. If you can create a story with a headline that causes an emotional reaction, a photo, something that causes your body to tense up, you stop thinking. You stop thinking about whether or not it's true, and instead, people share it. This is actually one of the big reasons why misinformation is spread across the internet so quickly. When confronted with an idea that contradicts, you get defensive, right? But there's another thing going on, which is called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is kind of the opposite of being defensive. It's, this completely aligns and supports my core beliefs. Therefore, it must be true, and I should share it because it supports what I think. Everybody has this. Everybody has an amygdala tingle. Everybody has a confirmation bias. So as academics, we have to recognize when this is happening emotionally or when we have a bias. And we should be able to discern those findings, okay? Even if they're contradictory to what we may believe, those findings may still be trustworthy. Speaking of bias, most sites, most things that were created by humans carry some sort of bias. It's sort of like farting. Everybody does it. Some people may deny it, but they still do it. It's part of being alive and being human, right? Bias is the same way. Bias sometimes comes from perspectives and beliefs and all of these other things. You may find information sources that are very biased. Maybe biases that lean toward what you believe and biases that lean against what you believe. Just because something is biased does not necessarily mean it's not trustworthy. That's an important distinction. You may, as an academic, need to listen to these different perspectives, bias or not, to be able to see what the whole picture is. I like to think of academic research, the act of doing academic research, as studying a diamond. A diamond is this beautiful three-dimensional crystal, right? And when you look at it, there's different faces and facets to the diamond. Our worldview, beliefs, and biases represent one facet. But if I only see one facet of that diamond, I'm not hearing the entire academic conversation. But as an academic, I need to know what's going on in my field, how people are approaching things, what are their perspectives, what kinds of research is out there, what are the findings. I need to know about all of the diamond. And in order to know all about the diamond, I have to examine multiple facets, right, in order to get a true representation of the academic conversation that's going out there. SIFT is going to help you determine and find those different facets and perspectives. So the S in SIFT, stop, is the one that I'm going to talk about here. Stop means if you are confronted with information that causes an emotional reaction, whether it is, oh, wow, this is great, I really believe in this, or if it's, okay, this can't be right, this is incredibly false and bogus because it's completely contradictory to what I believe, whatever it is, it's a signal that you as an academic need to stop for a second and then think to yourself, is this really worth my time? Is this worth my emotional investment? Is this information even trustworthy? That's what that stop means. The other part of stop is to stop and check ourselves to see whether or not we're on task, whether or not we're being distracted. I am, for one, very guilty of this. I will start doing research and going down a bunch of different rabbit holes, and then I'll find something that is completely opposite or different from my topic that's distracting me. Stop is my signal to say, okay, do I have even time to investigate this? Is it even appropriate or relevant for the research that I'm doing right now? Am I on task? That's the big S in stop, okay? I is about investigating the source. When you have a piece of social media, when you have even an academic paper, as you'll find in this chapter, the one thing that fact checkers did that all of the other people didn't do is that rather than looking and scrutinizing the paper to determine whether or not that paper in whatever it is that I view and see is trustworthy, fact checkers open new tabs and they look at what the internet says about that source. In this case, Wikipedia, while you should not ever use it as a confirmatory information source for your assignments, Wikipedia is really great about checking the temperature of whether or not a source is trustworthy. Same with just doing a general Google and looking at the overall feel for what the internet is saying about a source. It's a lot faster and easier than just sitting there and trying to read this from front to back and trying to find any false loose ends and so on. We rely on other sources to tell us whether or not the source is trustworthy, okay? That's the investigate. In this module, you're going to pick up a number of different powerful strategies to help you evaluate information. And this is not just information for your assignments, but it's information in general, whether or not you're doing academic or armchair research. It's about figuring out what is real versus what is not. There's going to be plenty of different examples in this module. It's one of the things I really enjoyed about it. And there's going to be a lot of exercises for you to take advantage or practice the different techniques that you'll be taught in this module. The last thing I want to talk about is on your quiz, as you've noticed, you've got a mix of different questions. Some of those questions test your understanding of what you've read and what you've experienced, videos and things like that. But another set of questions asks you to test your skills. On the last page of this module, right, what have I learned? There are some other examples in there. I want you to try them and see whether or not you can determine if that source is trustworthy or if it's bullshit, okay? If you get stuck on anything in this chapter, you can reach out and meet with me. We can go over things before you take the quiz or, once you've taken the quiz and before the quiz closes, you can always meet with me and we can go over questions that way. I wanted to bring up a shout out actually to one of my students because he actually was like, do students know about this? And I think you guys know, but I want to make sure. In the toolbar on the left side, there is a menu item called Smart Search. When you click on Smart Search, it's a search toolbar. Any terminology that you need, like for instance, citation chaining or investigate the source, type it in the toolbar. It will bring up the page where that information is explained. On your quizzes, you are encouraged to use that toolbar to look up some of your answers. You can open, and you should open other tabs to look things up. This is the reason why these quizzes are so open, because we want you to be able to demonstrate the skills that you've learned in these modules. So don't be afraid to do that. If you're asked to go into a database, go into the database. If you're asked to search for something, go and search for it. Don't just guess in your head, because A lot of times we're asking for things that if you see it with your eyes, it's obvious. But if you're just thinking about it in your head, it may not be so. Okay? I really hope that you enjoy this module. It's one of, like I said, my favorite modules, and it's one of the most important ones to learn. Have fun with Module 4. If you have any questions, you know where to find me, and I will see you soon. Bye now.